Hello everyone. Wanted to continue on my legend series, and today I wanted to give one of New Zealand's most prolific batsmen of all time, Glenn Turner. He was a right-handed batsman. He was born 26th May 1947 in New Zealand, and he played 15 seasons with the Worcestershire in English County. He had a fallout with the cricket administrators, and he made himself unavailable for a lot of tours. Otherwise, he could have played a lot more for New Zealand, and he could have become a very high test run scorer in the history of cricket. But unfortunately, he had issues with the cricket administrators. He played in test matches and one day matches. He played exactly 41 matches for New Zealand. He only played 41 matches each, which is sad. In test matches, he played 41 test matches and he scored 2,991 runs at an average of 44.64, and he scored 700s, and his highest score was 259 versus West Indies on the tour of 1972. He played 41 one-day matches and he scored 1,598 runs at an high average of 47, and he scored 300s, and his highest score was 171 not out against East Africa in the 1975 World Cup, which was at that point the highest one-day individual score. And in first-class cricket, he has scored more than 34,000 runs, and he has scored 103 first-class centuries. He is one of the few players to have scored more than 100 first-class centuries, and one of the few non-English players to do so. And in 1970, he scored 2,379 runs in the English season for Worcestershire, and he became the highest run scorer in the English season. And in that year, he was selected as one of the Wisden Cricketers of the Year. And in 1973, he scored 2,416 runs and again became the highest run scorer in the English season. And he also holds a very unique record. He holds a record for the highest percentage of runs scored in any completed innings. He scored 83.73% of his team's runs when he scored 141 not out of a score of 169 for Worcestershire versus Glamorgan in 1977. So that is a very unique record. Everyone else scored 27 runs in that innings, and there were 7 extras. He scored 141 not out in a score of 169. And he also holds a unique record. He's the only batsman to have faced more than 200 deliveries in a one-day innings. And in 1982, he became the first batsman in 33 years to score 300 runs in a single day in England. He did that for Worcestershire. And in 1974, he became the first New Zealand batsman to score a century in both innings of the Test match, and that helped New Zealand to beat Australia for the first time in a Test match. And on the 1972 tour of West Indies, he actually scored 4 double centuries on that tour of West Indies, including 2 double centuries. One of them was his highest score, the 259 against West Indies. So he was a prolific run scorer. And in that 1975 World Cup, in the first match of New Zealand, he scored 171 not out against East Africa. And at that point, it was the highest ever one-day individual score. And he was also the first batsman in one-day international history to score more than 150 runs in an innings. That was that 171 not out against East Africa in the 1975 World Cup match. He also scored 114 not out against India in the 1975 World Cup round-robin match. And after his retirement, he served as the New Zealand cricket coach, and he was the New Zealand cricket coach when New Zealand won their first Test series in Australia, which was a very huge achievement for the New Zealanders. And he was also the New Zealand cricket coach in the 1987 World Cup, the Reliance World Cup in India. And also in the 1996 World Cup, Wills World Cup that was held in India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka together. He was the coach in 1987 and 1996 of the New Zealand cricket team. So obviously, I mean, he was someone who could have scored a lot more runs. He had an appetite for runs. I mean, he played 15 seasons for Worcestershire in English County. It's really sad that a player of his caliber couldn't play more Test matches and one-day matches, especially Test matches for New Zealand. But like I mentioned in my video before, he had a problem with the cricket administrators in New Zealand. So most of the tours of New Zealand, he made himself unavailable for selection. So that is why he only played 41 Test matches for England. Sorry, for New Zealand. He was New Zealand's most prolific batsman at that time. He was probably New Zealand's first cricket superstar. I mean, later on there, obviously, there was Sir Richard Hadley, Martin Crowe, players coming through. But Glenn Turner was probably the first New Zealand superstar in cricket. I mean, like I mentioned, he scored 103 first-class centuries, and not a lot of cricket players have scored more than 100 first-class centuries. And he's one of the very few non-English players to score more than 100 first-class hundreds. So that is my video on Glenn Turner. His wife was also an ex-mayor of Dunedin in New Zealand, and his one brother was a poet, and his one brother is also a golfer. So he comes from a sporting family as well. Growing up, I've read a lot about Glenn Turner in magazines, sports magazines, cricket magazines, and I've heard a lot about Glenn Turner from ex-commentators Ian Chappell, Richie Beno, Tony Craig, Jeffrey Boycott, Sunil Gavaskar. A lot of people, I've heard them talk about Glenn Turner and how good he was. For someone who has scored more than 100 first-class centuries, one of the rare batsmen to have done that. He could have scored a lot more runs for New Zealand in Test match cricket if he had played. I mean, he was a very good, stylish player as well. He had a really good drives. He was a very good driver of the cricket ball. And it's just sad that he couldn't play more Test cricket. But he is definitely one of New Zealand's greatest ever batsmen, and definitely a cricket legend in his right. I mean, 2 times he was the highest run scorer in the English season in 1970 and in 1973, and also in 1982, scoring more than 300 runs in a single day in England. That is not a small achievement. Being the first one-day international player to score more than 150 runs in an innings, that 171 not out in that now 1975 World Cup, which was the highest one-day individual score at that point. Hope you have enjoyed this video on Glenn Turner. That is my second New Zealand player that I'm giving in my Legend series. The first was obviously Sir Richard Hadley. So I'm really glad to give Glenn Turner. A lot of people, old-timers, would know Glenn Turner, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't really know much about Glenn Turner because he didn't play more Test matches. But he was definitely someone who was way above his Test records. Not that his Test record is any little feat, but he's someone who was much better than the runs that he scored or the Test matches that he played. He's someone who could have easily scored around 8,000, 10,000 runs in Test cricket if he had played that many matches. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and hope it's some new information for you. Please take care, and God bless you.